At the will reading, my parents smiled as the lawyer handed Vanessa a check for $10 million. Then they turned to me and said, "Go earn your own." I didn't cry, I didn't flinch. I just stared at the polished table, pretending my pulse wasn't thudding in my ears. Then, something shifted. An older man in a gray suit stood up. "There's one more document," he said, unfolding a worn envelope with my grandfather's handwriting on it. My mother's smile faded. My father's fingers twitched. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. That envelope changed everything. It was the beginning of a storm that would tear through every carefully constructed lie they'd built, and it started in a place I hadn't seen in over a year. My grandfather's ranch on the outskirts of Charleston, where the wind once sounded like safety, and now carried the weight of secrets. I hadn't been back to the ranch since the spring before my grandfather passed. It was strange how something so familiar could feel so foreign. The gravel crunched under my boots as I stepped out of the car, and the wind chimes on the porch, once the soundtrack of summer afternoons and sun tea brewing on the windowsill, now sounded hollow. Echoes of something lost. I hesitated before knocking. The white paint on the door had chipped, same as always. The magnolia trees still leaned a little too far east, but I didn't feel welcome. When the door creaked open, I half expected silence. Instead, I got, "So, you finally decided to show up." My grandmother's voice hadn't changed, still sharp enough to cut glass. Her arms were crossed, her jaw set like stone. I stood frozen, trying to find something, anything in her face. Warmth, relief, confusion. But there was only cold. "Grandma, what's going on?" I asked, stepping closer. "They told me you were too busy, that you didn't want to be bothered, that you had a new life." Her voice wavered, then hardened again. "Your grandfather called for you, Claire. Every day, on his deathbed, he asked for you." I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. "That's not true. I tried to call, I came by in March. Vanessa was here. She said no one was home." Grandma's eyes narrowed. "We were here. We were always here." There was a long, painful pause. Then, she turned and disappeared into the house without a word. I followed her in, the air thicker inside, like the walls were holding their breath. She came back holding a worn leather notepad. "This is the number he kept calling," she said, handing it to me. I recognized his handwriting instantly, blocky and neat, with just a hint of slant. But the number on the page? Not mine. "Grandma, this isn't my number. Not even close. I've had the same one since college." She stared at the notepad, her brows knitting together. "They told us you changed it, that you didn't want to be tracked down, that you were ashamed of us." "No," I said, backing toward the wall for support. "They lied to you. They cut me off from you, on purpose." Her hands trembled. She sank slowly into the worn floral armchair beside the fireplace, like her knees had given up. "They told me the funeral was at noon," I whispered. "I got to the church and it was empty." She looked up, her face pale. "The funeral was at 9, she said softly. "They told everyone you didn't show, that you didn't care." My breath caught. I would never have missed his funeral. Never. For a moment, the room was quiet, too quiet, and then I felt it, like a crack in the dam, my chest tightening, my vision blurring. I sank down next to her, clutching her hand like a child. "I didn't know," I said. "I didn't know he was even sick until it was too late." Her voice softened, her hand brushing mine. "We know the truth now. That's what matters. We know." We sat there for a long time. The silence wasn't awkward, it was heavy, thick with everything unsaid. The old clock on the mantel ticked louder than I remembered. Outside, the wind picked up and brushed dry leaves across the porch like restless memories. Finally, Grandma stood up. Her hands shook slightly, but there was a fire behind her eyes I hadn't seen in years. "I'm calling them," she said. "Calling who?" She didn't answer at first. She went to the old rotary phone on the kitchen wall, the one Grandpa refused to replace, and began dialing. Each click of the dial felt deliberate, loaded. Like punctuation to a sentence she'd waited too long to write. I watched her fingers, thinned by age but steady with resolve. When the line connected, her voice turned cold and clipped. Betty, I need you, Jacob, and Vanessa here. Now. A muffled protest came through the receiver, but she cut it off. No, it can't wait. Be here in an hour. She hung up without saying goodbye. Then she turned to me. The lawyer's on his way too. I blinked. Grandpa's lawyer? She nodded. Your grandfather, he left some things. Instructions. But he made it clear they're to be read only with everyone present. So that's exactly what we're going to do. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. I just nodded. For the next hour, I sat at the small kitchen table, tracing my finger along the edge of the wood. That table, the same one where Grandpa used to sip his morning coffee while reading scientific journals I mailed him from college. The place where he first asked about my bee communication study. The place where I once told him I wanted to study plant memory, and he didn't laugh. I looked around the kitchen. Same curtains, same hum of the old refrigerator. But the air had changed. Footsteps echoed on the porch. The doorbell rang. Grandma placed a hand on my shoulder. Stay here. I'll call you when it's time. From the kitchen, I could hear them arrive one by one. My mother's overly sweet voice. Oh my goodness, it smells exactly the same in here. My father's calm, measured tone. I thought this was handled already. Vanessa's dismissive sigh. Seriously? This couldn't have waited until after the estate finishes processing? Then silence. And Grandma's voice, colder than I had ever heard it. Please, sit down. Mr. Harold Keene is on his way. He'll be reading Walter's final instructions. I could imagine their faces. Confused, curious, a little annoyed. They didn't know I was here. They didn't know what was about to come. And neither did I. But deep down, I hoped maybe just once someone would say out loud what I'd always known in my bones, that what they did wasn't love, that silence and exclusion and manipulation weren't misunderstandings. They were choices. The front door creaked again. I heard a new voice, steady, professional, the lawyer. This won't take long, he said. But it must be done properly. That was my cue. Grandma's voice called out, Claire, come in now. I stood. My heart raced. And as I stepped through the kitchen doorway into the living room, 3 heads turned in my direction, eyes wide, expressions unraveling all at once. My mother's smile froze. My father's jaw tightened. Vanessa's face paled. The air snapped like static. They weren't just surprised to see me. They were terrified. All 3 of them just stared. My mother blinked like she'd seen a ghost. My father adjusted his collar, a nervous tic I hadn't seen in years. Vanessa's mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. She looked like someone had yanked the script from her hands mid-performance. I kept my back straight. If they expected me to cower, they'd be disappointed. Grandma gestured to an empty armchair across from them. I sat down slowly, steadying my breath. Mr. Keene, the lawyer, gave me a quick nod, polite but unreadable, then opened his leather briefcase and pulled out a thick manila envelope. This, he began, is the last will and testament of Walter R. Whitman, recorded and sealed per his request. In addition to the official documents, he has included a handwritten letter to be read aloud. No one spoke. He cleared his throat and began. To my wife, Margaret Whitman. Grandma didn't even blink. I leave our family ranch, the house, and sufficient funds for her comfort and care. She knows how to find the rest. Then he turned the page. To my granddaughter, Claire Whitman. The room tightened. I felt it. I leave the Whitman Research Annex located at 317 Laurel Creek Road, Charleston, including all laboratory equipment, funding accounts, active research patents, and intellectual property currently filed under Whitman Innovation. A gasp, not mine. My mother's eyes darted to Vanessa. I kept my hands folded. Mr. Keene continued. And finally, the remainder of my estate, financial holdings, stocks, and retirement funds shall be divided equally between my two granddaughters, Claire and Vanessa Whitman. There it was. A bomb, quiet and elegant. But the explosion came right after. Vanessa shot to her feet. Her chair scraped the floor with a screech. What? She spat. He gave her the annex? The entire facility? Her voice cracked, raw. That's insane! You told me. She pointed at our parents, trembling. You said it would all be mine. That if I just kept visiting him, if I smiled and played nice, that everything would come to me. My father's lips tightened, but he didn't respond. My mother stared at the floor like it might open up and swallow her whole. I just sat there, still, watching it all unravel. Mr. Keene raised one hand calmly. There is more. Mr. Whitman also wrote a personal letter to Claire, which he requested be read aloud in this room, in front of the family. Vanessa let out a bitter laugh, but no one joined her. Grandma handed him a folded letter from the drawer next to her. He wrote this the week before he died, she said. He made me promise. The lawyer unfolded it slowly, careful not to tear the creased paper. Grandpa's handwriting, broad, confident, filled the page. To my dearest Claire, Mr. Keene began reading. If this is being read, then I'm no longer by your side, but my belief in you remains, stronger than ever. The words hit me like a warm wind through an open window. You were always the quiet one, the observer, the thinker, the one who asked why, when others didn't care to. Vanessa slumped back into her chair. Mom's fingers twisted in her lap. Dad looked out the window. You built your own truth in a family that never learned to honor yours. I felt something shift inside me. Not rage, not revenge. Just recognition. You were never a mistake. You were the legacy I was proudest of. Tears blurred my vision, but I didn't look away. I wanted them all to hear every word. Every single word. Mr. Keene's voice remained steady, even as the weight of the words shifted the air in the room. I saw how you clutched that little notebook when you were 7, tracking how long it took raindrops to fill a glass. I saw how your face lit up when you discovered patterns, while everyone else only saw distractions. My chest tightened. I remembered that notebook. I still had it. He continued. I saw the way your joy dimmed when your mother brushed you off. The way your father changed the subject every time you shared something you were proud of. I heard my mother inhale sharply. I didn't look at her. Vanessa was easier for them, the letter went on. She sparkled in all the ways they understood. But you, Claire, you glowed in ways they couldn't translate, and instead of learning your language, they shut you out. Vanessa shifted in her seat, arms folded tightly. I don't blame her entirely. She played the part they handed her. But you wrote your own role, and that, my girl, takes courage. A tear rolled down my cheek. I didn't wipe it away. I remember the day you won your first science fair and asked me to hide the trophy. You said, maybe if I don't show it, they'll stop looking at me like I'm someone else's child. A low, painful exhale escaped from somewhere across the room. Maybe my father. You deserved celebration, Claire, not invisibility, and while I can't undo the damage, I can give you something that is entirely yours, a place to build freely, without apology, without their shadows. Mr. Keene paused, folding the letter slowly. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was loaded with memory, resentment, and something new. Clarity. I cleared my throat. I remember that science fair, I said softly, breaking the tension. Mom didn't come. She was at Vanessa's dress rehearsal. Vanessa flinched. I came home afterward holding that trophy like it was some kind of sin. Dad finally spoke. Claire, this isn't the time to rehash the past. No, I said, my voice sharpening. It's the only time, because all I ever got from either of you was, why can't you just be more like your sister? I turned to Vanessa. And from you, every time I tried to be proud of something, you turned it into a threat. She scoffed. Oh, come on. You always made yourself the victim. I worked for what I got. I nodded. You mean you visited Grandpa when it was convenient, smiled when you were told to, said the right things because you thought it would pay off. Vanessa's expression hardened. And what, you think you're so pure? You disappeared for years. No, I snapped. I was cut off. You told Grandma I didn't want to see her. You gave Grandpa a fake number and made sure I never got his messages. That's not distance, that's erasure. My mother stood up abruptly. Enough. Claire, you're twisting everything. This family has been through a lot. This family, Grandma cut in sharply, has been living a lie. And I let it happen far too long. Mom turned to her, stunned. Mother. Don't, Grandma said. I watched you all turn a blind eye to Claire's pain. I believed you when you said she didn't care. I should have known better. My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Look, Claire got her education, her lab camps, her travel. That wasn't free. No, I said. It wasn't, but you didn't pay for any of it. Grandpa did. Every single cent. The scholarships he found for me, the flights, the journals. You didn't even know where I went half the time. My voice cracked. You made me feel like a burden. He made me feel seen. Vanessa stood up. This is ridiculous. I was told I'd get everything. I was the one who stayed. I was the good daughter. No, I said calmly. You were the performer. The chosen. I was the hidden one. But Grandpa didn't forget me. And now, you don't get to erase me anymore. Vanessa's face twisted. Why should you get anything? Just because you're a sad little genius with a lab coat? I smiled, just slightly. No. I get something because I earned his love honestly. And that's the one thing you never understood, love isn't a performance. Then, Grandma stood. She walked to the center of the room. Slow but unshaken. I regret that Walter left you anything, she said, looking directly at Vanessa. You may have played the role, but it was never love. It was a transaction, and I'm ashamed I didn't see it sooner. She turned to all of them. Leave. You're not welcome here. My mother gasped. Mon plie. Out, Grandma said again. Now. They didn't move at first. Then Vanessa grabbed her bag and stormed out, heels hitting the wood like gunshots. My parents followed, stunned and muttering about legal challenges. And for the first time in my life, they couldn't take anything with them. The door clicked shut behind them. No slamming, just finality. I stood there for a moment, rooted in place, unsure what to feel. The room was quiet now, not tense, not explosive, just free. Grandma walked past me and sat down slowly on the sofa. Her hands, which had trembled moments earlier, now rested calmly in her lap. They'll come back, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. They always do. Maybe, she replied. But this time we don't have to let them in. It took a while for that to sink in. For so long, I had operated on a silent contract. If I proved myself enough, if I achieved enough, if I stayed useful, maybe I would be seen. Maybe they would call me daughter, sister, family without flinching. But standing in that room, with the echo of my grandfather's words still hanging in the air, I realized something painfully simple. I had been trying to earn love from people who never had any to give. And Grandpa? He'd seen that long before I did. I think I need air, I said. Grandma nodded, and I stepped outside onto the back porch. The boards creaked under my feet, a sound that once meant home. Now it meant change. The magnolia trees were still blooming in the corner yard. Beyond the fence, the same red dirt field where Grandpa once let me build my first greenhouse kit had collapsed after 2 weeks, but he called it a perfect disaster, and we'd laughed about it for years. I thought of that girl 10 years old, knees dirty, eyes bright, and I wondered how long she had been buried under expectations, not her own. When I came back inside, Grandma had placed a kettle on the stove. She moved slowly now, but her actions were deliberate. You know, she said, Walter started planning that research annex 5 years ago, before he even got sick. I looked at her, startled. He told me he wanted you to have a space that didn't require permission to be yourself. I felt the tears before they came quiet, clean, No shaking, just release. That night, I stayed in my old room for the first time in years. The wallpaper was faded, the mattress too soft, but the ceiling still had those glow-in-the-dark stars Grandpa helped me stick up when I was 9. I'd made him arrange them in scientifically accurate constellations. He hadn't even questioned it. As I lay there, I realized something else. The house didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt reclaimed. The next morning, I brewed coffee for both of us and brought it to the kitchen table, the same one I used to avoid when my parents visited. Grandma folded the newspaper and gave me a tired but warm smile. "So, what now?" she asked. "I think I go see it," I said. "The annex, the lab." She nodded. "He'd like that." I looked out the window. The sunlight broke gently across the magnolia branches. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I had to run, prove, or explain. I didn't feel invisible. And that more than money, more than any inheritance, was the first real gift I had ever received from this family. The one person who believed in me had left behind something greater than legacy. He left me permission to begin again. The first time I saw the annex, it didn't look like a laboratory. It looked like a converted barn, and that's exactly what it was. Nestled at the far end of a dusty road off Laurel Creek, the building had wide beams, a tin roof, and a pair of double doors that looked like they belonged on a horse stable, not a research facility. But inside? Inside was magic. The space had been completely renovated. Glass panels lined the east wall, allowing in full morning light. Tables were neatly arranged with untouched lab equipment, microscopes, centrifuges, data tablets, and a 3D printer still wrapped in plastic. Shelves held unopened boxes labeled with my name. In the center of the room stood a workbench. On top of it, my childhood notebook. The one I thought I'd lost in college. The one with torn pages and messy handwriting and tiny diagrams of honeybee communication systems. My knees almost gave out. Grandpa hadn't just built me a lab. He built me a home for my mind. Over the next few weeks, I moved into the annex full-time. I recruited 2 graduate students, Tara and Micah, friends from my university program, who shared the same stubborn hope that science could still be human. We started small. A local grant for micro-irrigation research, then a partnership with a regional farming co-op to test sustainable crop rotations. We made mistakes, burned equipment, cried over rejected grant proposals and broken data models. And yet we kept showing up. Every day, I unlocked the doors to a place that didn't ask me to explain myself. A place where ideas weren't ridiculed, just tested. A place where being too intense or too quiet or too smart wasn't something to apologize for. One afternoon, after a particularly brutal funding rejection, I found myself alone in the annex. The others had gone home, the lights were dimmed, and I sat on the floor by the storage closet, surrounded by printouts and empty coffee cups. I reached into my bag and pulled out Grandpa's letter, the one I asked Mr. Keene to let me keep. I unfolded it, found the line I'd read 100 times already, and whispered it into the room. "You wrote your own role." It wasn't just encouragement. It was instruction. That night, I wrote a new proposal, not for another irrigation system, but for a youth science program based in rural schools. A program for the kids like I used to be, quiet, curious, overlooked. We called it the Little Scientist Initiative. Our first year, we worked with just 12 students. They came from towns where schools still used outdated textbooks, and no one had ever brought a microscope to class. We gave each child a leather-bound notebook, a replica of mine, with Grandpa's words stamped on the first page. "Write the things they don't understand. One day, the world will." That fall, a shy girl named Amber, barely 13, hair always in her face, showed me pages of bee behavior observations she'd done on her own. Her calculations were clumsy, her grammar was wild. But her mind? Brilliant. When I told her that, she stared at me like I'd handed her a planet. "You actually read it?" she whispered. I smiled. Of course I did. And in that moment, I understood. This wasn't about replacing what I lost. It was about planting something new in better soil. And letting it grow without fear. The email came 3 years after the will reading. It was from a lawyer, not Mr. Keene, but someone representing Vanessa Whitman. The subject line was short. Request for visit. Claire Whitman Innovation Annex. At first, I braced for legal trouble. I assumed it was another attempt to challenge the will, reopen a clause, or stir up some version of the past we'd already buried. But when Vanessa arrived, I barely recognized her. Gone were the designer heels and perfectly coiffed hair. No makeup. A navy coat too big for her shoulders. She walked into the main lobby slowly, like she didn't want to take up space. I stood beside Grandpa's portrait above the reception desk. She paused when she saw it. "He always knew who you were," she said quietly. "Even when I didn't. Especially when I didn't." For a second, I didn't know how to respond. So I nodded. "I'd like to see it," she said. "The lab, the work, what you've done with it." I could have said no. But I didn't. I gave her the tour. She walked beside me through the greenhouse complexes, the crop development rooms, the student display wall with photos from our Little Scientist initiative. She didn't talk much. Just asked simple, honest questions. "How do you fund all this? What's this device for? Do the kids get to publish their results?" When we reached the community garden, a space where local families grow food using our methods, she stopped walking. There were children harvesting lettuce, a mother and son laughing near the compost bins, a father testing soil moisture with one of our field kits. Vanessa turned to me. Her voice broke. "I don't expect you to forgive me." I stayed quiet. "I just wanted to see what he built for you, and what you built with it." She didn't cry, but her hands wouldn't stop moving, tugging her sleeves, tracing invisible circles on the railing. I let her stay as long as she wanted. No lectures, no retaliation, just truth. We don't talk often. But twice a year now, Vanessa volunteers for the Youth Science Camp. She helps students with presentation skills, how to explain complicated data in plain English, how to stand with confidence. The kids love her. Some even call her Coach V. At the end of her first summer volunteering, she handed me a folder. "I wrote a communication guide for the shy kids," she said, almost embarrassed. "Thought it might help." I opened it later that night. It wasn't perfect. But it was thoughtful, gentle, real. And for the first time in my life, I saw a version of my sister that didn't scare me. She never apologized with words. Not directly. But she shows up. That's more than I ever expected. And maybe, just maybe, it's enough. We're not sisters the way other people mean it. But in this tiny corner of a world Grandpa dreamed up, we've stopped pretending. And somehow, that's the beginning of something true. It's been 6 years since the will reading. 6 years since the front door slammed behind my parents and Vanessa, their footsteps echoing down the porch like the end of a performance no one clapped for. I haven't spoken to my parents since. Sometimes their names appear in emails I don't open, in charity press releases or financial articles from Florida, where they retired early. I don't hate them, but I don't miss them either. What I do think about is the work. The annex has grown into something beyond my imagination. What started as one converted barn is now a full research campus, 4 labs, 3 greenhouses, and over 60 acres of trial fields. We've developed drought-resistant seed varieties that now feed thousands in parts of the South where traditional crops fail. We've partnered with universities from Kenya to Brazil to share findings in regenerative agriculture. And just last month, I stood on a stage in San Francisco, accepting a national grant for climate innovation. The lights were bright, but I didn't flinch. I wore a navy blue suit, and Grandpa's pocket watch tucked inside the breast pocket, the one Grandma gave me last year, with his initials barely faded. Inside the lid? A tiny photo of me age 10, standing proudly next to my honeybee communication display, grinning from ear to ear. He carried it with him every day, Grandma had said. Now, it sits on my desk at the annex, right where morning light hits it and casts small circles of brightness over my research notes. Some days, I talk to him. Not with words, Just in the quiet. When an experiment fails, when a kid from the program wins a scholarship, when I remember how close I came to believing I didn't matter. He never let me disappear, not really. And now I understand why. Legacy isn't a monument. It's a map. One built from choices, and kindness, and tiny anchors left behind for someone to follow when the world tries to erase them. These days, Grandma lives in a small apartment connected to my house in town. She's slower now, more forgetful, but still sharper than anyone else I know when it counts. We drink coffee every morning in the sunroom. She tells me stories about Grandpa I've never heard. How he once planted a tree just to propose. How he believed soil could remember kindness. How he always knew I would come back. And maybe he was right. Maybe I had to leave to understand what coming back would mean. Some evenings, I walked to the far end of the annex fields, past the solar irrigation test beds and the kids' garden plots, to the old wooden bench Grandpa built by hand. From there, I can see the stars, real ones, not the glow-in-the-dark kind I stuck on my bedroom ceiling. But they still make me think of that girl I once was. The one who kept asking why, even when no one cared to answer. The one who refused to be quiet. The one he believed in. And on nights like that, when the wind moves just right through the trees, I swear I can hear his voice in the leaves.